Well, hello there. Today's weapons of rat destruction, agency, or why we should believe in agency, the Darwinian test from HADD. Introduction. The problem of meaning in an uncertain world. Human beings are wired to see intention everywhere. In the rustle of trees, the turn of a stranger's head, the sudden change in fortune. This tendency, known as Hyperactive Agency Detection device, HADD, can lead us astray, prompting false accusations or imagined plots. And yet, across history and cultures, when the belief that individual actions matter has weakened, so too has a society's ability to adapt, cooperate, and hold itself together. The paradox is clear. Our sense of agency can be flawed in the details, but abandoning it entirely risks eroding the very structures that make collective life possible. This video argues that belief in agency is more than a comforting story. It is a Darwinian meaning anchor, a pragmatic assumption shaped by survival pressures, one that preserves cooperation, responsibility, and purpose even when certainty is out of reach. The Darwinian test. Lessons from HADD. Hyperactive Agency Detection, HADD, is the name researchers give to a deeply ingrained human bias. Our tendency to see intention and purposeful actors behind events, even when none exist. It's why we might think someone is watching us when we're alone in the woods, or why ancient cultures often attributed storms, plagues, or good harvest to the will of the gods or spirits. From an evolutionary perspective, this bias didn't arise by accident. It was shaped by the brutal arithmetic of survival. Imagine two kinds of early humans. The cautious overdetector hears a rustle in the grass and assumes it's a predator. Most of the time, it's just the wind. Occasionally, it's a lion. Okay. Meanwhile, the skeptical underdetector hears the same rustle and assumes it's nothing. Most of the time, they're right. Occasionally, they're wrong. And, that mistake, it can be the lion. The costs of these two errors are not equal. A false positive, thinking there's an agent when there isn't, might cost you a few seconds of running, a spike of adrenaline, or a moment of embarrassment. Meanwhile, a false negative, failing to detect the real agent, might cost you, everything. Your food supply or your children's safety. Over thousands of generations, natural selection would have favored the cautious overdetectors. Better to jump at shadows than to ignore the predator in the grass. This is the Darwinian test in action. When the cost of missing something is catastrophic and the cost of overdetecting is small, a bias toward detection is adaptive. HADD is the cognitive legacy of that survival strategy. It's not rational in the strict statistical sense. It produces many false alarms. But it is rational in the evolutionary sense because it maximizes survival over the long run, extending the logic to belief in agency. Now, let's take that same Darwinian cost-benefit logic and apply it to a different question. Should we believe that people, ourselves and others, have meaningful agency in the world? Here, agency means the capacity to make choices that genuinely influence outcomes. is the foundation for concepts like responsibility, accountability, and, ethical praise or blame. We can run the same kind of thought experiment we had for HADD, but at the level of meta belief, not is there an agent in the grass, but do agents exist at all, and should I act as if they do? Consider the four possible combinations of reality and belief. Agency is real, and you believe in it. You act as if your choices matter. You take responsibility for your actions. You coordinate with others, trusting that their choices matter too. Result: high survival value, strong cooperation, and the ability to adapt. Agency is real, but you disbelieve in it. You fail to act when you could have changed things. You abdicate responsibility, assuming outcomes are fixed. You become vulnerable to those who do act with purpose. Result: catastrophic inaction and loss of influence. Agency is illusion, but you believe in it. You may waste some effort or feel misplaced guilt, but you still maintain motivation, social trust, and readiness to act. Result: manageable cost, the false positive of agency belief. Agency is illusory, and you disbelieve in it. You gain no real accuracy advantage over the believer. You lose motivation, moral accountability, and the ability to mobilize collective action. Result: meaning collapse, the false negative of agency belief. When you compare these outcomes, the asymmetry is striking. Just as with HADD, the cost of underestimating agency is far greater than the cost of overestimating it. Believing in agency when it isn't objectively there still preserves many of the social and motivational benefits that keeps groups functioning. Disbelieving in agency when it is there, on the other hand, can be disastrous. The Darwinian verdict is the same. When the evidence is ambiguous, err on the side of belief. It is the safer evolutionary bet, not because it guarantees truth in every case, but because it maximizes survival, cooperation, and meaning over time. Agency as a meaning anchor. In the ActFoE framework, a meaning anchor is more than just a nice idea. It's a stabilizing principle. It's a shared point of reference that helps us keep moving forward when the facts are incomplete, the situation is unclear, or the future feels uncertain. Think of it as a bridge between two shores. On one side, we have what we can prove, the hard evidence, the measurable data. On the other side, we have what we still need to decide and act on, the choices that can't wait for perfect certainty. Without a bridge, we risk getting stuck on the evidence shore, unable to act until we know everything. But in the real world, waiting for perfect certainty often means missing the moment to make a difference. A meaning anchor gives us a safe, shared way to cross that gap. Belief in agency, the conviction that people can make meaningful choices, is one of the strongest meaning anchors we have. Here's why. It connects cause to responsibility. If we don't believe people have agency, then the idea of holding someone accountable starts to crumble. The rule of law depends on the assumption that individuals could have acted differently, that they had a choice. Without that, justice becomes hollow and laws become mere procedures without ethical weight. It preserves the possibility of change, innovation, reform, and problem solving all rest on the belief that our actions can alter outcomes. If we think nothing we do matters, why try to improve anything? Belief in agency keeps the door open to progress. It sustains motivation under certainty. In difficult times, it's easy to slip into the why bother mindset. Belief in agency is the antidote. It says, even if I can't control everything, I can still do something. That something is often enough to keep individuals and communities engaged until conditions improve. Without this anchor, the other civilizational norms in ActFoE, forgiveness of debts, rule of law, hospitality, lose their ethical force. They risk becoming empty rituals performed out of habit rather than conviction, because the underlying belief that choices matter has been lost. Integration into the ActFoE framework. Within ActFoE, belief in agency isn't just a background assumption. It has a specific place in the architecture. It functions as a meta anchor inside the nihilism defense module. That means it's part of the system's active checks against meaning collapse. When we reach a decision point and the evidence ambiguous, the framework prompts us to ask, should we assume agency here? And the operational rule is clear. When in doubt, assume agency, because the survival cost of underestimating it is far greater than the cost of overestimating it. This isn't blind optimism. It's a calculated choice, grounded in the same Darwinian logic we saw with HADD. The risks of assuming agency and being wrong are far smaller than the risks of denying agency when it's real. By making this assumption explicit, we also strengthen the other norms in the framework. Forgiveness of debts assumes the debtor could have acted differently in the past and can act differently in the future. Rule of law assumes individuals are accountable for their actions, making justice meaningful. Hospitality assumes that extending goodwill is a choice and that such choices can change relationships and outcomes. In this way, belief in agency doesn't just sit alongside the other norms. It actively reinforces them, ensuring they remain alive, purposeful, and resistant to drift. Addressing the agnosticism tension. Up to this point, the case for believing in agency has been framed in evolutionary and practical terms. But there's a legitimate concern that needs to be addressed before we close the argument. If we were to add recognition of agency as a formal civilizational norm, placing it alongside forgiveness of debts, rule of law, hospitality, we would be doing more than adding another procedural safeguard. We would be taking a position on a deep philosophical question. Do humans truly have free will? That's not a neutral move. Determinist or fatalist worldviews, whether grounded in theology, philosophy, or certain interpretations of science, might reject such a stance outright. For them, agency is either an illusion or irrelevant to ethical systems. If ActFoE is meant to be culturally portable, usable across many belief systems, we can't afford to alienate entire traditions by making metaphysical agreement a prerequisite. The way through this tension is to change the framing. Instead of declaring agency as an absolute truth, we treat it as a pragmatic assumption, a working rule we adopt because it produces better outcomes, not because we claim to have solved the metaphysical debate. In other words, we act as if agency is real because doing so preserves meaning, accountability, and cooperation. And because the Darwinian cost-benefit test shows it is the safer bet. This reframing keeps the framework open to multiple worldviews. Determinists can still use ActFoE without contradiction because they can accept the operational value of assuming agency even if they deny its ultimate reality. And a believer in free will can embrace it without compromise. By holding agency as a functional anchor rather than a metaphysical creed, we strengthen the framework's defenses against nihilism while keeping it accessible to the widest possible range of users. Conclusion: the evolutionary case for choosing meaning. Belief in agency is not just a comforting story we tell ourselves. It is an adaptive safeguard shaped by the same survival logic that explains why our ancestors jumped the shadows in the grass. The Darwinian meaning anchor works because it tilts the odds towards survival, cooperation, and resilience even when certainty is out of reach. In a world where meaning can leak away under the pressure of uncertainty, this anchor keeps the bridge between evidence and action intact. It ensures that when the facts are incomplete, we still have a reason to move forward, to take responsibility, and to work together. We do not need to prove agency beyond all doubt to justify acting as if it exists. We only need to recognize the asymmetry of risk, the cost of abandoning it in motivation, in cooperation, and the ethical architecture of society is far too high. The choice, then, is not between truth and illusion, but between a stance that sustains meaning and one that erodes it. Treat agency not as a metaphysical gamble, but as a survival-tested tool, one that preserves the foundations of civilization.